Welcome back to the show. We are glad that you have stayed on and continued with us. We have been talking about siblings in ministry, and in our session or panel we have Pastor Godfrey Gishuki and Apostle David Juma, who are actually blood brothers, and we have been talking of the dynamics and relationships, the relationship of working together in ministry and how to wade through the challenges. And some of the things they have talked about is committing to the vision, choosing to submit to one another, and defining the structure of leadership in order to be able to find one leader and the rest can rally behind them. So when we went on a break, Pastor Gigi was talking to us about working with your wife in ministry. So question is, many times in ministry we find that one of the spouse is called in ministry, while the other seemingly is not mostly involved in ministry. How can these two people work together in order to bring synergy in what they're doing, especially in ministry and maybe away from ministry, so that they're not pulling away from one another?
Some of the issues around it is really like agreeing to work together from the beginning. The vision and the commitment of the family, of the two, of the couple must be there. The person who is not actively involved in ministry on a day-to-day basis, maybe they are in the marketplace, must have the same commitment to the ministry, or rather they are committed to the vision of the ministry as the person who is actively involved. So that then, because you know they meet at home in the evening, and so if you're differing on such fundamental issues, then it becomes very difficult to do ministry together. So my field is that there has to be commitment, there has to be clarity, and you must agree to die together, you know, on this, on the ministry. And I think even the pastor, the person who is in ministry, must also commit to support the person who is in marketplace.
We established a principle in the ministry here that has been very helpful. The principle is the principle of teamwork.
Yeah.
And the first team is the couple. Husband and wife is the first team. So, and you realize that in our eldership, the local church leadership team, when they got their appointment, there are members there with their spouses. So that when decisions are made, for instance, that we have this wonderful project coming up for the kingdom, we need to finance, and let every family commit themselves to give something. The man is not taking the announcement to the wife at home. She was there and she knew how things went. And so there's no disagreement at home, as it were. We are all standing together. But we are trying to exemplify in this ministry that the first team is a couple, husband and wife, do the best you can. But if one, according to their calling, are not speakers, are not preachers, you know,
Singers.
are not singers. They like being quiet in the background. There are also ministries to handle from the background. You know, go to the kitchen in the church.
Massive ministry.
Go and do massive ministries. Go and do ushering. If you are so scared of greeting people, you know, go and do other aspects of administration, or go act with the children, so that there is no ministry which is greater than another. The principle is servanthood. So let's serve at all levels. And that has been very helpful.
So then the choice is the couple should sit and choose to actually work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. On the flip side, Pastor Gigi, we normally have a couple who are both strong in ministry. And of course, ministry is also in marketplace, but when we talk about the church context, both are preachers or powerful men of God and women of God.
Yes.
And you find these two get married together. Each one of them, God gave them their vision.
Yes.
How should such a couple work together so that at the end of the day,
Yes.
each one is not pulling to their different agendas and vision?
Within the same church, I
Yes,
guess.
within the same church.
Because that's very important.
Yeah.
I think like we will still go back to the same thing of leadership. So first of all, if the husband and wife are both pastors in the same church, there needs to be clarity on who is the senior minister. I mean, if you want to use that kind of a description, who is in charge, who is the leader. So that needs to be defined, and so that then if it is the wife who is the de facto leader of the ministry, by virtue of her calling, and she's been in ministry. The husband is probably more a marketplace person, but he's also a preacher. And whatever arrangement there are, there has to be clarity. And and if you don't talk about it, if you don't define things, you will always have some conflict. And like we are saying, we are going back to the same thing of commitment to working together. You have to decide that we are in this together, we are serving God, we have a calling to fulfill, and this is how we have chosen to express our calling. For example, if we say that we have chosen to express our calling through a church, a local church, then you're in that together. So one of you needs to be, we need to have clarity on who is the pastor, the senior minister, and then the other person can serve the assisting role. When it comes to actual preaching, you may have that, maybe you are the senior pastor in the ministry, but your wife is such an excellent preacher, and the congregation always, it's like, we want the woman of God today. So I think you should let people be. So I wouldn't have a problem if my wife was such an excellent minister and so thorough with the word, so effective in communicating the gospel. I would remain the senior pastor, but she's the preacher, and preaching is not easy. So so don't just know what you wish for. So be careful before you you are trying to angle for the preaching part.
So Apostle, such a couple, how would you advise?
Are you talking about me? Because
you of course, you are the preacher. Pastor Sunta is also a firebrand.
Yes, something else. Spouses have to bring encouragement, not the opposite, discouragement and warnings and the threatenings. And the next time, and so those kind of things, you will kill each other in terms of vision. But there has to be encouragement. The other thing on vision, you see the word vision, when God has given you a mission, you need to find ways in which you implement that vision. That way is what you call a mission. And it's important where the husband has a vision, the wife has a vision, the whole matter of submission comes back to submit to one another. I know the husband, for instance, covers the wife as Christ covers the church. But there are certain areas where the wife covers the husband also, providing a nice meal, for instance, which is not poisonous.
Good clothes.
And all that. So it's a matter of submitting to one another. Like Ephesians chapter 5 talks about husbands, love your wives, wives submit. Then down there you find it's good to submit to each other. It's the same thing in the ministry. Be sober, be prayerful, and of course at the same time it's good to learn from others and have mentors and spiritual fathers, people you can emulate, people you can listen to, so that how do I deal with this situation at this point.
So such a couple, for example, ministers who are blessed with children, how do the children come in ministry? Because we many times find pastors' children who are lost in the middle of all these things.
Again, I think at the family level, I would say that it's important for pastors to encourage their children to express their ministry to the extent possible, and where they feel that they have a calling, to encourage that, to speak into that, to build them up, and but at the same time to give them freedom to become what they want to become, because at the end of the day, it is one thing to push a child to ministry, but it's another thing when that child or that that child has recognized their calling and they want to actually execute that calling. So as parents, we have responsibility of our children to help them, to guide them, and to recognize their ministry, and also give them opportunity where that becomes needed. So the parents must be very conscious of what they are doing to build the vision and the opportunity for their children to serve the Lord to the extent possible. Yes.
So Apostle, many times we hear pastors' kids are getting lost. How should the parents, ministers, treat their children so that at the end of the day they are not sending others to heaven, then their children are left lost here.
Like Noah succeeded
Yeah.
in having his children,
Yeah,
you know,
in the
come
ark.
into the ark. We learned over the years from others how a minister should take care of their children. The danger is you go to the mission, go to the church, leave the children behind on TV, cartoons, and other stuff. So someone else is speaking to them. They say a child between 0 and 7 years is the most critical time. And that's the moment to impart children. So what I learned was, for instance, in my case, was when schools are closed and you have all the time, let the children be involved with what the parents are doing. So I would go with them to the mission field with my wife. You know, at least we would choose one major one over the holidays where we are all involved. That way, the children began to see, you see, as a small kid, they'll see the father as a hero, the mother as a hero. I remember one time, they would see how we lay hands on people, you know, lift your hands, touch, and then the person falls. So one time I went to the house and I found Sheila and Charlie. One of them was the usher, the other one was saying touch, you know, and one was falling on the other. So I said, this is good because they think it's drama, but it's something they saw. And this is a way they have seen and they will never depart from it. So it's important for parents to involve their children in what they do. Even in business, this is a way to mentor them. The Hebraic children never went to that school out there just like that. They learned under their parents. That's why Jesus was under Joseph and Mary. So involve the children in what you do. That will impart on them. The other matter is pray for your children and believe God that the same God you serve, the Holy Spirit, will touch them. And that's the bottom line. Because I tell you what, you can do all the things you do, but the enemy is a liar, the devil is a liar, attacks the children, you know, and diverts their attention and all that, and they end up in a mess, fall in the hands of wrong friends, wrong influence. So prayer is critical for a man of God, with the assurance and faith that you've taught and raised the child in the way the child should go and will not depart. That's important. The other thing is, there are a lot of dynamics on kids. The other matter is, allow your children to also be exposed to other children of other ministers who are a little bit older.
So create relationships.
Create relationships. What happens to your kids when they see other kids who are older, who are committed to ministry and the work of God? What happens? Your kids will begin to desire to be like the other kids of your friends they have seen. And that's important for ministers and ministers, older and younger, to always be bringing families together because it helps impact the children. And we have seen it working over the years. Where the children go haywire and the child is not wanting God, is not born again, is into all kinds of vices. It's a moment to encourage the man of God. It's a moment to encourage that family in terms of prayer and maybe counseling and somebody else reaching out to the child. And at the end of the day, believe God for a miracle, because the enemy absolutely wants to destroy the children.
Involve your children in ministry, pray for them, create relationships for them with other ministers' children. Pastor Gigi, I'd like you to speak to the congregation or a congregant out there who have kind of set standards for the pastor's children and they want them to live in a certain way. Could you just speak to them?
I know there's a lot of pressure actually for the pastor's kids because they are measured on the same with the same rod that they measure the pastor. So if the pastor is a very dynamic, powerful man of God, you know, he lays hands on the people and they fall. So you know, there's some kind of expectation. It's actually a false expectation that the children should be walking the same power and grace. Which is that's a very high expectation. So I think congregations should allow the pastor's kid to be. Let the children be what they are, and don't measure them against the success of their parents. Maybe it's good for people to know that Charlie was the chief technical officer during the COVID home transmissions. So even when I would go there, she's the one, you know, counting for me on a count of 1, 2, 3. So she may not come here and sing or you know, do major things. So you may ignore her in the background, and you could say, oh. What does she really do? What ministry does she do? I am giving that as an example. But the truth is, these children have so much work to do, and there is a role they play. It may not be prominent, it may not be at the pulpit, it may not be even in the visible activities, but they have a place. And as long as the relationship in the house is real, and they can express themselves, and they are at peace with their parents, I think that's most important.
Apostle, now that you are a living example, how can you say to such people who set standards?
One of the greatest things that we need to tell members to do is to befriend them and be able to speak to them encouragement and tell them, hey, you know, be all that you want to be. I'm praying with you. And that's very, very encouraging. That they want to see that the congregation is not that just putting pressure on the parents and on their behalf, or putting pressure on them on behalf of the parents, but rather the congregation understands that they are in a very unique position and that they need encouragement and they need, you know, affirmation. And I think that's the role general congregations can do, to leaders speak to the pastors' kids and tell them, we are praying with you, we're supporting you. In case there's anything you need help, we can assist, and we want you to continue to be a shining example. But even if they fail and you find that they have failed and something has gone wrong, tell them, look, I'm there with you, I'll pray with you, I'll support you no matter what happens to you, and it shall be well. And that will be very powerful.
Yeah. And I could add on that, I think one of the things we need to appreciate is that a child, I mean, somebody who is probably in their 20s or even in their 30s, they still have so much life left to live. And so sometimes we can judge people early, too early. You know, somebody is 18. And you're expecting that they should be turned on, they should be right in the forefront. I think it's putting unnecessary pressure on children and on people, and not letting them have their way. I guess we're borrowing it from maybe when we observe the monarchs and some of the political families, and we see their son coming up, and we are saying that guy will inherit the political position of their father, or so. And I think people put pressure because they kind of frame, and if that child is not guided properly, they can become victims of that pressure and that expectation. So I think what we would encourage is that, especially in the church setting, congregants should not put pressure on the children of the ministers. They should give them space to grow, and they will grow. They will mature. They will be grown people, and I think it's when, if somebody is 50 and is still doesn't seem to know their way around, they are as a problem, even if they are pastors' kids, or even if they were a kid of one of the members. So that's a problem. So we should isolate it. Somebody is 30 and still, or 40 and still in their mother's house. That's a different problem. So I think we need to let the children have their space. Yes.
Thank you. So as we maybe close the show, Apostle, I'd like you to speak to young people out there, maybe young ministers who are not married and are intending to join ministry, having had all these things that we have talked about, the dynamics in ministry and all that. How can you advise such a people who are intending to,
You know, because when they get married, then they have a family and they have to be involved in ministry. Usually, when I'm doing premarital counseling, I usually ask somebody, tell me the boy, the young man, tell me about this lady, tell me whether you know what she's called for, and what's her strength, what is her calling, what is her ministry. Then I tell the brother, then if you know who she is there for, you have a responsibility to help, to support, to ensure that you always do that. Then I ask the lady, do you know what this young man has been given? They say, oh, I know he's such a servant of God, he's such a minister. And say, okay, if he gets married and stop preaching, then you're the one who came to destroy that. And I lay that foundation to help young people know, look, discover each other's talents and gifts and potentials, and calling. And then it is your responsibility to support, to affirm, to pray, to intercede, and to be there physically to give all the support. Why? Because that way you will have a proper foundation. I also caution that don't just rush into marriage, to marry without thinking, without prayer, without counseling, without, leader talking to your spiritual leaders, because your minister may be married and completely lost. and you find that as a young person you was in the front line, but after you got married, something went wrong. It looks like you never took time to take care of the foundation so that you can be able to take off. It's important for young people. Ensure you study, check out those dates you do, those moments of courtship, the tea you're taking, the chips, I don't know what they eat these days. Don't just be time of just looking at each other for nothing. Deal with the matters and get to know who this person is, because I have a calling in ministry and I have to serve the Lord the rest of my days, like Pastor Gigi is saying. Young people have a lot of time in the future, so lay a proper foundation, and there are people to help you, so that when you take off as a couple, you are ready to serve the Lord with impact. Yeah.
Is that your parting shot?
Well, you want me to shoot somebody?
Yeah, you.
Anyway,
Just for 30
love
seconds.
God
Yeah.
as a young person and develop relationships seriously, find mentors and fathers, look for information, and make decisions to serve God the rest of your life. And we will meet you 20 years from now.
Pastor Gigi, your parting shot?
Yeah, I would say that you know, doing ministry with brothers and sisters or siblings, it's not easy, but we have to decide to be committed, and we have to put work to it, and commit ourselves to serving one another, and focus on the vision of the work. Yes.
Thank you very much for watching the show. We believe that you have been given wisdom or received wisdom and understanding on some of the areas and the challenges that you may have faced working together in ministry as siblings, as husbands and wives, and even as children. So we thank you very much for watching and staying tuned. My name is Linda Talam. See you again next week.